There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Battle lines are being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds, getting so much resistance from behind. Think it's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs. Mostly say, hooray for our side. Think it's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Paranoia strikes deep
into your life, it will creep.
Starts when you're always afraid.
Step out of line, the man come to take you away.
It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
The song was associated with the Vietnam anti-war movement in 1966. I was reminded of it by the news of Fairy Creek Blockade, a year-long act of civil disobedience near Port Renfrew to halt logging of the last old-growth forest on Vancouver Island. In 1993, RCMP arrested 1,000 people for a similar movement during the War of the Woods at Clayoquot Sound. At Fairy Creek in Pacheedaht territory, the number would soon exceed that, and confrontations were getting violent. What was happening wasn't really clear to me, and some of the opinions I heard bothered me. The protesters have nothing better to do, one fellow told me. The First Nations people don't want them there, said another. They leave garbage in the bush. Were they right, or were they expressing what is called confirmation bias? That's the rejection of information that doesn't support one's prior beliefs. Notable examples are Joe Biden stole the U.S. election. The earth is flat. No proof needed. No long-distance sailing experience required. End of discussion. In his book, My Story as Told by Water, David James Duncan says, only an admission of our ignorance can open us to fresh knowledge. What was I to do about my own ignorance of Fairy Creek? In July, I decided the only way to find out what was true was to go there. I'd talk to the protesters and their supporters, take pictures, report Fairy Creek as I saw it. It's about a 2-hour drive from Nanaimo to Lake Cowichan, and another 40 minutes along Pacific Marine Road to R&R Camp, the first of several before the main access gate up the logging road to Red Dress Camp. A camp established in honor of missing and murdered girls and women. At Lake Cowichan, I almost missed the turnoff down Pacific Marine Road. At a gas station, I asked two RCMP officers wearing police liaison t-shirts for directions. "I'm with media," I said. One pointed me in the wrong direction and said, "Have fun." His partner, seemingly embarrassed, apologized for the confusion the next day. Along Pacific Marine Road, the hills are lush and green except for the frequent bald spots that remind you of an old dog with mange. As dusk approached, I was passed by a dozen or so police vehicles headed towards Lake Cowichan, for the night, possibly, at a motel, maybe. The police have been here for months. How many would be stationed at the protest on any given day? An officer I would ask the next day estimated 40 to 50. I wondered about the cost to taxpayers for 50 police officers, half a dozen ATVs, helicopters, drones, accommodation. I had new questions now. Was it worth it? Did anyone running for office in the last federal election bring that subject up or suggest an alternative? R&R Support Camp, a few kilometers from the main access gate to the Blockade, is a roughed-out clearing in the bush where I'd spend the night. Here I began to learn who the people were who supported the frontline protesters. I didn't meet anyone who didn't have anything better to do. A businessman came to join his two sons that he'd raised to be environmentalists. He told me where I could park and pointed out the kitchen where I could get coffee and something to eat. A construction worker, camp named Karst, was spreading confiscated belongings of arrested protesters on the ground, hoping their owners could reclaim them. Before long, I was in my sleeping bag, snoring. The next morning, I drank coffee with two grandmothers from Quadra Island. They helped prepare meals. I'd ask all of them more about their reasons for supporting the Fairy Creek protest.
My name is Tree here while I'm at the camp. And I came because I am really worried about how little old growth is left on southern Vancouver Island. And I want to do anything I can do to help these people possibly save what's left.
You're from Quadra Island, so you made the trip over here. And what's your impression of what you've seen so far?
Amazed at how complex and well organized this camp is and how things are being done to just keep up the fight. I'm really amazed. It's really admirable as far as I'm concerned.
So you tell me that you're a member of the Council of Canadians?
Yes, I have been for a long time, yes. So I'm used to working on issues, of social justice, etc. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But this is a biggie, right? We're at a crucial time here. Turning point, a pivotal time.
Well, that's right. And people are signing letters to the Premier. Amazing numbers of people are handwriting and signing letters. Yeah, my name is Paradise. Well, I'm in camp here. I have come here because as an elder, I'm taking a stand for old growth forests. And my sign here says it all. It says, "Protector of our children's future." I feel it's my obligation. I feel guilty to be part of a generation that let them down, and I want to make amends for it, you could say.
You mentioned, Tree, something about you were impressed with the social atmosphere of this place. Can you tell me what you meant by that?
It seems people have seemed very friendly. Then some people seem very organized in a friendly way. And then they contradict each other in a friendly way. It just seems to be a loose kind of a community that actually functions.
And everybody seems to have a role to play, and they seem to do it without any complaints or anything?
I'm as impressed by the society that I'm seeing here as I am with their cause.
Burdock has a degree, but it didn't help him find purposeful work. "I wanted to be a part of something important," he said. "Being here, I'm learning that work lifts me up."
But really what I realize and have been realizing is that security does not at all come from having a job. That security and safety comes from my community and from my family. I used to think work was like this one specific thing that you do, and that people have to be able to see it in order for it to be valid. And then that is what validates my existence on this planet, is the work that I do. Being here, I'm learning a lot about how work and play are really intertwined, and how like there's so much work that goes on that is not just like the work that the colonial capitalist system calls work. There's the work of community care, there's the work of taking the time to like make tea for someone who's going through a hard time. There's the work of the quiet work of doing the dishes when no one else has time to do the dishes. There's like the quiet work of rest, so that I can better take care of myself and better take care of others.
And all of that work seems to be appreciated.
Totally, yeah.
Marmar's family restaurant struggled through the recession of 2008.
And that speaks to a flawed system, a structurally flawed system. And so this movement is nothing new. It's just our elders are getting louder. They're finding their voices. They're tapping into their inner children, remembering what it was like to grow up and be devalued in the face of stuff and money. So we're inherently coming into our own power at whatever age we're at, in whatever generation, and we're connecting to our child, connecting to the art of play, and we're realizing that play and work are the same thing. I am a being of love, and this colonial capitalist system destroyed me over COVID. It took every ounce of power that I had to step back and say, it is the system, it is not me. I am not inherently flawed. I should be allowed to be worthy just breathing this air. I should not have to prove myself to a governing entity that my life is valuable. Every life is already inherently valuable. And I think once people realize that there is privilege within the system was never meant to work for us. We were only meant to work within the system.
At 8:30 the next day, I was at the main access gate to the road leading up to the blockade at Red Dress Camp. Several media people have been waiting here for the RCMP to open the gate. Two of them agreed to share their experience on camera.
My name's Erin, Erin Shrapnel, and I'm independent.
You were told earlier that the media relations officer would be down here to talk to us in half an hour, and it's been 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's been 40 minutes. We're getting on to an hour pretty soon here. And this seems to happen every day. Media come to the gate, and we're made to wait for seemingly arbitrary reasons. Our time is not respected. We've got deadlines to make. We have to get up there. People are, they often start arrests before we even get there anyways as well, so.
Yeah, okay. So this is a significant location today. Do you know what's going to be happening up there? What we'll see?
So I believe it's up at the Red Dress Camp. The Red Dress Camp was created by Indigenous people and Indigenous matriarchs. The red dresses signify the missing and murdered Indigenous women, Two-Spirit, and girls across this country. And the idea that there is enforcement happening at that camp is hugely heavy symbolism at that point. So.
My rights as a journalist have been infringed upon when I've worked for Canadian Press out here. They've also been infringed upon when I've been out here as an independent. It's my first day back. I'm already dismayed that we're being kept at this exclusion line. I thought that Justice Thompson had ruled free-flowing access for the media. I thought that I would just be able to enter whenever I want to. But I've been standing here for an hour at the ACP, the Access Control Point, trying to get access to go do my job in the enforcement zone. So the convoy of police cars went in an hour ago. There's no reason why I should be standing here. The court ruling stated that we could have access. That's not coming into reality today. The inconsistency out here for working journalists puts a huge amount of strain on us because we never know how to conduct our operations as journalists out here. I never know how hard I can push with the RCMP representatives that are on the ground. We'll see what happens today.
Eventually, Media Communications Officer Denzel arrived. He records the names and news outlets of media, step one before we are transported up the hill and told to get at the bottom of a long line of cars and ATVs. We have a view of the red dress blockade, but are too far away to hear or see what's happening there. Reporters complained to Denzel, who says he's asked his commander to let us get closer, without success. Reporters argue a judge has said our confinement in the RCMP's, quote, temporary exclusion zone is unlawful. These complaints are flatly dismissed.
Media members accompanied by police are restricted by illegal exclusion zones, as stated by Justice Thompson.
And we're entitled to create the bona fide police officer. We can create a small exclusion, temporary exclusion zone while they're working.
You have the maximum of 20 feet by law. Can we have a measurement, please?
This is the way the commander decided the location, and that's what we'll be.
Can you clarify for us the distance of this exclusion zone from the operation?
Safe distance. People will be walking there, back and forth. Our police operations, our police van will be going back and forth. And we want to make sure this is an area for our police officers to work.
Can you explain why we're not permitted to have a distance from up there? Why is it here that we have to?
Right now, this is the zone where we're going to be safe for everyone. Not to be impeding as well.
We can't hear the negotiations.
We are being restricted.
This is something that we should be capturing.
Yeah.
There's no safety risk here.
There's no machinery.
We're talking about police operations or our vans. We're going back and forth. We don't want anybody else in the way when we're doing the arrest.
Yeah, we'd like to get off the road. Is there a zone that we can safely listen and document from that's off to the side?
Like, what about right over there?
Number 4, the police actions have seriously and substantially impacted important liberties within the injunction area, including the ability of individuals to circulate freely, the freedoms of assembly, and most importantly, including the freedom of press. We can move around freely as long as we are not impeding your actions.
And now, this is the location we're going to be.
But this is a road, so we are able to move around this road safely.
We would like to get off of the road so we can safely
You can stay
document.
where he's at, but not too close.
Can I go down there?
Negotiate a midway point that's off of the road so we're not impeding your actions.
Talk to Sergeant Smith. He's really the one who would be able to make those moves. Yeah.
We will see the faces of both parties.
Yes, once she's released. When police aren't here, when someone's placed under arrest, we have an execution of our duties to protect their privacy. We will escort them out. Once they're released, down below, wherever it is, feel free to interview anyone. But in police custody, we're not here to help the media talk to witnesses.
Sergeant Smith. We're able to get a better understanding of what's going on.
Okay, I understand the commander and a media relations officer in conjunction with the Department of Justice decides where the media is a safe zone. If anything turns violent, there's rock thrown in that, you are in an area that cannot be injured. So this is why they deem this. Now at any time, we encourage you to go back to the courts and ask the judge if he wants to put how many meters you're allowed to be away. Then we can obey that court order. But right now he says a safety zone. So it's up to legal authority to go back to the judge. If the judge tells us they want you within 5 meters, we will obey the judge. But right now, the commander and everyone's, our Department of Justice have determined that they've identified this is a safe zone right there. You cannot be injured in the safe zone if things come flying.
Can you explain to us the distance of a safe zone? Like, how do you determine how
Every
large a
case
safe
has
zone
its
is?
merit. I couldn't get into that. unless the Department of Justice was here to deem it with their discussion.
If we don't like what the police interpretation of safe zone is, says the liaison officer who earlier told me to have fun, we can go back to the judge for a more specific distance. It's a cynical suggestion, considering the fact that there have already been over 90 unanswered complaints of RCMP violating civil rights.
In terms of media, what would your definition of obstruction be? Because I know that's been what some have been arrested for.
Obviously, like refusing to leave when they're asked to leave, for example, because they're obstructing.
Yeah.
They're in a way where we can't do our job, we're going back and forth as an ongoing operation.
Yeah.
And they're becoming in no way.
Mm-hmm.
Or at one point we had the line on, the people were moving the line back. Some of the media were staying there, we kept moving people back and they stood there.
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to move the line back so we can move forward. And they refused to leave.
Okay.
At the same time, they're obstructing us.
Okay.
You're impeding from us from moving forward.
So about an hour ago, there was a negotiation between DTL and members of the forced offender community. The RCMP requested that they remove some of the red dresses from the barricade and respectfully handed it to the elder community. After giving them a 10-minute window for negotiation, the forced offender community has decided that they are not going to remove the red dresses. They're going to stay where they are, and they're going to stand in solidarity for the Indigenous community here, for the trees, and for everything that this place represents to them.
You're right now trying to steal more from our people. Enough has been stolen from us. Why are you here trying to steal more? We are not leaving. We are not leaving. Where are the people?
No, they're afraid. It's not easy to surrender to the truth and something bigger than yourself. It's very scary, but for all of our bodies go back to the earth. This is your burial ground.
You don't even care about your burial ground. That's gonna be bad karma. Creators watching. We're all watching. And I will pray for all of you tonight when I go to bed, and I pray that you will find a better way to walk away from colonial systems that hinder Indigenous people. We are not leaving. We are not leaving.
Well, it looks like a couple of people have been arrested here.
For the children!
It seems clear to me now that there needs to be follow-up input from the court, or the police will have the final say at Fairy Creek, and probably at future protests. Much later, while listening to a Canada Land podcast, I will hear Judge Wally Opal say, the problem is a broken police complaint system. It's absolutely wrong, says Opal, for a national police force in the 21st century, not being amenable to independent civilian authority to examine their conduct. Legislators and parliamentarians, he goes on, have left the RCMP to their own devices. But if you don't have civilian oversight, essentially, you have a police state. Were the RCMP just doing their job? No. I saw officers repeatedly warn reporters not to talk to them or the protesters, or, quote, we'd be out of here. Police wore no identity badges and refused to give their names. Others wore controversial thin blue line patches. The National Police Federation says they symbolize the role of police to curtail social chaos, a notable objective. But critics say the patches represent an us-against-them mindset that seems to include the press, who are continually threatened here.
You can document that, but when you're shouting and commenting,
I'm allowed to ask them to let us know if they're.
We witnessed you being disrespected. We witnessed that. We have it recorded. We have it recorded how you're being treated.
5 inches from our legs and hands and ripping people's arms, bending them backwards, pulling fingers back.
In one occasion, I was standing next to a young Indigenous woman praying, albeit loudly, to her creator. She was behind a police tape, but a senior officer ordered that one in the green taken down the hill.
Congratulations. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Do your work past the borders, past the exclusion signs. I see you.
Jim, escort her past the vehicles to the bottom of the hill. This one right here in the green.
For talking to Creator. For talking to Creator, you're asking me to be escorted. Don't
Take
worry.
her down to the vehicle. Pass. This way, man. You gotta go.
I was talking to Creator.
Yeah.
Can somebody document that? I was saying a prayer, and they're
He'd do the same with a young reporter I'd been talking to later. She met the same fate from the same officer. Police had directed all media to one side of the road closer to the barricade. There wasn't a lot of room for our group. This reporter had moved a bit above me. She wasn't obstructing police, but he ordered her taken down the hill too. She wasn't doing anything wrong, I said, then added, I'm going with her. Earlier, some journalists had discussed walking down the hill in protest. I thought this young reporter might appreciate company if she decided to do that. It was about an hour's walk. Fortunately, Denzel, always friendly and polite, was there to offer us a ride. Denzel's car had been making strange noises. En route, he stopped to consult a tow truck driver who was preparing to pull a car to Lake Cowichan, even though it wasn't blocking the road. I hear people are having to pay $2,500 to get their vehicles back, I said. Apparently that's so, said Denzel. I've since wondered if the court or NDP government should be saying something about that. On my third day at Fairy Creek, I bumped into Karst, the forest construction worker, at the main gate. He would shed light on the problems with current logging practices in the industry, as he saw it. He spoke about government's failure to redress them and what he thought legislators should be doing before all the old growth has gone.
There's a huge variety of reasons, but I guess we could specifically talk to the need for reform in our logging practices, and we're exporting out our highest grade wood. Oh, it's terrible on the morale. I mean, you can drive through these forests and you can see, there's lots of fir growing, nice fir. And why do, when I get to the lumber store, do I have to pick through this crap? It literally takes more time to pick through the piles of wood than it does to go and get it. It seems like they're really trying to build an industry where it's more based around a quick crop rotation. So instead of allowing a longer rotation where we can get a higher density in the wood, it's harvested in the 35 to an up year range, where the pith between the rings is wide, it's not tight grained, and it's almost like it's just come to mowing a lawn.
Everybody sort of, who comes up here, finds a niche. They find a job to do to help out in the camp, and you told me you want to make sure people are safe.
Yeah.
How do you do that? What do you do? A couple of examples.
Well, it's a huge movement, and it's very hard to have this many people out and try and reduce the impact. So we get in and we'll get a latrine in and set up the proper garbage stuff. We often do a swath through the forest, and there is unfortunately a lot of garbage is dumped in the woods, so we actually go in and clean it all out. We try and get everything where many hands are working to keep the areas safe and clean. We want safety from potentially aggressive loggers coming in. We want safety for health standards. We don't want to have a large impact on the place, because we're here to actually save the forest and not destroy it. So, there's a lot of people come out here and they don't really have the campcraft experience, and they're eager to really help, but sometimes you have to slow that. You'd be like, hey, be the voice of reason, and be like, listen, we don't need a big giant encampment here where people can just trying to keep it as minimal as possible.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Some reporters have spent weeks at Fairy Creek and submitted comprehensive reports. Mine was to answer the personal questions I had about the protesters and their supporters, to determine if the assumptions I had heard from others were accurate or just confirmation bias in need of a little first-hand experience. I also wanted to see if the police were just doing their job when it came to their behavior with media. After I'd answered those questions, I began to do extra reading and thinking. Let me share some of what I've learned that way. 1. Not all Pacheedaht people want the forest defenders to pack up and leave their territory. Elder Bill Jones invited the protesters to be there. 2. Premier John Horgan admits that fact when he says the Pacheedaht want the protesters to leave. Half-truths fuel negative confirmation bias. They divide and alienate people. They muddy the issues. 3. What issues? In August, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs called for a possible solution to conflict in the forest: conservation financing, which they say is, quote, essential to Indigenous cultures, supply clean water and carbon storage, support wild salmon and tourism, unquote. 4. This should have happened by now if legislators were doing their job, but political parties disagree on how forests should be managed. In 1994, the NDP attempted to save forest valleys with new, stringent regulations. That was upended in 2003, when a Liberal government weakened legislation and deregulated the industry. Karst, the forest construction worker, noted delayed action by the NDP today to enable the reforms needed. 5. In 1776, Thomas Paine, the author of a pamphlet called Common Sense, wrote, "Government far from being the means of order are often the destruction of it." Paine championed government for the people over monarchies in Europe and the American colonies. We've come a long way from real representative government since then, and much deeper into a colonial system that promotes and protects corporations. 6. To reduce tension and future standoffs in the bush, and there will be more, any reforms in the forest industry will have to embrace the spiritual significance of old trees and their importance to all life on our planet. Duncan says this transformation by corporations is the greatest challenge to government as we move forward. 7. It is clear that some BC politicians understand this and accept it as truth. Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau told me recently, quote, "We need to start with a new Forest Range and Protection Act, originating from today's understanding of forest ecosystems and climate change, and how we value forests for more than just timber. The future has to be led by Indigenous people and encourage Indigenous knowledge about land use and forests. It can't be politicized," unquote. Judge Thompson has refused to extend an injunction that was granted to prevent protesters from impeding logging operations at Fairy Creek on Vancouver Island, noting that actions of the RCMP threaten the reputation of the court. He described the protesters as, quote, good citizens in the important sense that they care intensely about the common good, unquote, exhibiting, quote, disciplined and patient adherence to standards of nonviolent disobedience, with only the occasional lapses from that standard, unquote. I agree. That's what I saw. I liked all of the people I met immediately at Fairy Creek. Canada needs more of them. 9. But in a quick turn of events, an appeals court judge reinstated the injunction, Quote, in a situation where criminal law has not been effective, it is in the interest of justice to grant this stay to prevent serious prejudice to Teal Jones, said Stromberg Stein. That ruling puts the ball clearly back in the BC government's court, where it belonged in the first place. Is it old-growth forests or business as usual? 10. So, when will the protesters go home? First and Oath said, quote, the protesters are doing what John Horgan said he'd do, protect old growth, until he holds himself to that promise. They're not going anywhere, unquote. Stop, people. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. This is Jack Emberly.
What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs. Mostly say, hooray for our side. Think it's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Paranoia strikes deep into your life, it will creep. Starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come to take you away. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.